Why are more than 1 in 5 UAE residents paying more for rent this year? That's what we're discussing on this edition of Inside AB. I'm Bernd Boosman and I'm here with Jeremy Lawrence. Jeremy, Yallacompare has a new survey about people paying rent in the UAE and the trends. What did it have to say about it?
Yeah, of course, Yallacompare, the comparisons website. They have a consumer confidence index, the second time they've done it in this format, so it was for Q2 2018. It was 1,347 UAE residents contributed to it, so it was a website you could answer all the questions, and on the state of their finances. Now, it had lots of things to say about how consumers are feeling at the moment, which was picking up basically this year. But I found this the most interesting bit, which was this surprising statistic, and it was that 38.6% of residents are paying more rent, 21% are paying more for the same place, which is even more surprising. 19.8% are paying less to rent out the same property than they were last year, so only less than 20%, and just under 35% paying the same. So they're the bottom line statistics.
And remind us again, why is that such a surprise? It kind of bucks what one might think reading media reports, for example.
Yeah, of course, because I mean, you've written a lot of these stories this year. Rent prices have been coming down on average. Recent studies showed that rents in Dubai and Abu Dhabi fell in Q2 by as much as 4% compared to last year. Compared to Q1. And Cavendish Maxwell have said that the vast majority of real estate agents expect rents to decrease by a further 5% in Q3. So clearly, rents are falling, but that's not necessarily people are paying, 20% of people are paying more despite this.
So how does one explain that discrepancy between the market and what is actually happening?
Right, well, there's several factors for this. The first that we should know is that some people, 10% of residents, are taking advantage of good deals to upgrade to a bigger home, which makes a lot of sense. But the majority, 66.5% of people, said they were in the same home. So how do you explain it? One thing, there is a caveat here, that most rent surveys and the ones that you've written about are for properties coming onto the market. So a tenant moves out, a new one moves in. So it's the difference in the value. That doesn't take into account residents staying in the same home.
I see. So for that fifth of residents that are paying to stay in their home, I mean, they're not starved for choice. So why is that?
This is it. So why are they still paying more even if they're not moving? I spoke to Jonathan Rawling, who's the CFO at Yallacompare, because I really wanted to try and dig into this. He said people firstly don't realise that they're in such a good position to negotiate. They're obviously not reading enough of our stories. So given the market conditions, he says that's what people should be trying to do. He says that if a landlord does try to raise your rent, as clearly they are doing, that people again don't know that they can take that case to RERA, the Dubai regulatory authority for real estate, and that RERA will do a good job and be fair. Maybe expats think that they don't stand a chance against their landlord, but they do. If the landlord's trying to put it up above the area average, you can take him to RERA for that. But again, why are people not doing that? Well, he said that it's seen as a hassle to do that, of course. You have to pay 5% fee of your rental contract to raise the case. And then people obviously think about the cost of moving, the cost of paying the finder's fee, the cost of moving. And if the landlord's only putting it up by a little bit, which we probably are, you think, well, I might as well stay.
So any other reasons landlords are raising rents besides the ones you mentioned?
Okay, so landlords can, I think I just mentioned there, landlords can raise rent if your property is undervalued by more than 10% in the area that you're in. But that only really applies in the main to sort of legacy rents. Say you've been in that place for years and it's still way undervalued compared to the rest of the market. So that doesn't really apply to most people. One thing to note about that as well, if your landlord does try to put rent, this is another very important point, he has to give you notice 90 days before the end of the contract. If he comes to you on day 89 and says, I want to raise the rent, he can't do that. The rent just automatically renews. But it's the same with the tenant as well. Jonathan Rawling was keen to note. You have to, if you want to renegotiate with your landlord, you have to tell him before 90 days before the end. If you get to day 89, you can't renegotiate. It's just going to roll over.
And any other rules that tenants should be aware of? And most importantly, what advice did they have for tenants going forward?
Yeah, well, so Jonathan Rawlings said, be aware of the market. That's the first thing to know. As we keep writing, rents are falling. You shouldn't have to be paying more unless you're on a ridiculously cheap deal. You shouldn't have to be paying more to live in the same house this year, but you need to go about this the right way. So Jonathan Rawlings said, simply put, consumers may get a better deal if they move, but are generally not paying less rent for the same property. We'd recommend trying to negotiate lower rents wherever possible. So that's the advice from the professional. Do your homework, know what your rights are. Don't be scared to have that sort of firm but polite conversation with your landlord.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, Jeremy. For, of course, this story and a lot of other stories about rents and Dubai's real estate market, go to arabianbusiness.com. You're watching Inside AB. Make sure to tune in every morning and subscribe below. Thank you.